Please rewind this cassette.
Hey guys, Pat here, drinking some Voodoo Ranger. It's a IPA, because I am a hipster faggot. Oh wait, you can't say those words anymore. That's the world we live in now. You can no longer say the new F word, which used to be fuck, but fuck is still okay, but there's a new F word that's replaced it. And of course, you have the R word. So I'm here to talk about Dave Chappelle's new special, Sticks and Stones, which, who hasn't made a video on this already? This seems to have become the most talked about thing on YouTube. This reminds me of The Last Jedi, but with stand up comedy. It's pretty weird when you think about it because Dave Chappelle's been a progressive guy his whole career. I mean, this is a guy that's been talking about systemic racism for decades. You go back to his brilliant appearance on Inside the Actor Studio, I would argue the best episode of that show, and he brings up systemic racism. Isn't he Muslim too? This is a guy that is pro-gay rights. He is pro-equal pay. He's pretty much everything politically, he is on the left. And I'm not saying that as a negative or anything. I'm just saying it's very odd that he's being attacked by media outlets that he probably agrees with more than he doesn't. I'm in Columbus, Ohio, which is the state of Dave Chappelle. He lives over in Cincinnati. So, Dave, if you ever want to come over and visit sometime and have some Voodoo Ranger with me, that would be rather wonderful. So, I'm a big fan of Dave Chappelle. His comedy specials going back to the 90s are some of my favorite. The Chappelle Show is one of my favorite shows of all time. I watched it religiously when I was a kid. I've been fascinated by him as an individual, as a poet, a comedian, an artist. He's one of the few comedians who's able to do sketch comedy, create characters, do stand up, and also just act and perform. And he's just a multifaceted artist. He's just somebody that has so much potential. I mean, you go back to even Robin Hood Men in Tights, but he always showed an ability to be very visual and tap into the zeitgeist and find that nuance in society about the truths that we all feel but we can't vocalize, which is sort of the job of the comedian. There's not enough praise you can give Chappelle because he's the guy that left Hollywood when they offered him all the money because he felt like a whore and them being the pimp. At least that's how I read his message in one of his specials where he told the story about the book Pimp. I believe the book was called Pimp. But huge fan of him. His recent Netflix specials haven't been my favorite. The first one is pretty funny. The second one in Houston's okay. I really like the one where he's just talking and he tells a story and it's chilling. He's become a great storyteller and sort of evolved past the comedian. He's a great storyteller in the same way Bill Cosby was, which I hate to bring up Cosby, but Dave doesn't really need to be funny anymore. He's just interesting to hear talk. And as a fan of Spalding Gray or Eric Bogosian, one-man show type comedians who could do monologues or early John Leguizamo stuff, was embracing where Dave was going. But with Sticks and Stones, he went back to a pretty straightforward comedy special. And the criticism from the media is that Dave is out of touch. His jokes were offensive and he is ignorant or trying to get attention. Well, if he was trying to get attention, he succeeded because, as you see, the 27% on Rotten Tomatoes is then met with a 99% audience rating. The special has gotten so much more coverage and discussion that I think it would have gotten otherwise just because of the negative reception. And I guess the joke of all of this is they're saying he's out of touch and out of date and obvious, where they feel like they're out of touch and out of date and obvious. Because for 8 years, maybe even the last 10 years, we've had to deal with the same kind of message from the media or comedians or outlets or just the bullshit that's been The Daily Show or Samantha Bee or Stephen Colbert. And now that Dave has flipped the script and bringing up talking points that have been prominent on YouTube, 4chan, Reddit, which I'll even admit they are a little outdated. Some of the points he makes, like the LeBron James joke, I remember people saying that years ago about equality. So it isn't that Dave's tapping into new ground. I think what he's doing with this special is it's like a defense mechanism. That's why this is called In Defense of Dave Chappelle. And it's not just me defending him because he doesn't need to be defended, but where he really stood, I think he was defending free speech and comedy with this special that, okay, I don't really want to talk about these things. I would like to reach another level and talk about more important things, but you guys are being so radical, you're being so abrasive, you're being so vocal that I have to talk about these things that you're sensitive about. I have to make fun of transgenders. I have to make fun of the LGBT community. I have to talk about race in a different way. I have to talk about equality for women in a different way. And I think really what it was is just we should be allowed to say this as comedians. We should be allowed to find pathways to humor. And this reminds me when Louis C.K.'s set got leaked, where he made the Parkland shooting joke, and then all these people attacked him, especially Judd Apatow, and saying that we should be able to have a debate about comedy and what comedians are allowed to say. Now, that's true. Like any art form, comedians shouldn't be able to, avoid criticism. But at the same time, people try to look at the comedian and say, oh, it's a joke, but it comes from a real place, instead of just seeing it as absurd, or they're making the joke without actually making a commentary, even though Dave Chappelle does always have subtext to his humor, which he talks about a lot. And I think the subtext here was, you're not going to tell me what to say, you're not going to tell me what to do. And when you act this way, when you have this outrage towards things that we should be able to talk about, it just creates more of an audience for those things. And in many ways, he proved his point. By the negative reception, because of the things he's discussed, he has gotten more support because of it. So he kind of proved his own point. Or at least that's how I interpret it. So let's look at some of these reviews and what they're saying. Sticks and Stones registers as a temper tantrum. The product of a man who wants it all. Money, fame, influence, without much having to answer to anyone. There's some truth to this, if we're being fair. I mean, Dave really doesn't have to answer to anyone. He does have some confidence now. He even has said that he's mastered comedy. I mean, a lot of the times it feels like he just goes up there and is talking without rehearsing so much of the bits, which is probably an illusion he puts on. I'm sure he actually thinks this stuff out. I wouldn't agree that it's a temper tantrum. He seemed pretty calm to me. I don't think he came off that angry. I think he was frustrated that because I remember this with his other specials. I would go read reviews for them on outlets like Fox or Salon, and they would just shit on his comedy. But every time he said something that was progressive, they would praise him. And this is something that's become really annoying with recent media, like shows like Dear White People. And anytime there's a show that has a pro-trans message or a pro-gay message, or is pro-women equality, or women being oppressed, like The Handmaid's Tale, it gets praised right away. And then anything that has a different point of view on this gets attacked. I mean, remember when 3 Billboards had that huge New York Times article attack it, and it kind of killed its Best Picture chances? That's the climate we're in now. If you just put a pandering message into something like Miss Monopoly, where the women get $240 when they pass go and the men get $200, then media outlets act like this is some amazing thing. And yet, if you just, I mean, Black Panther falls into this for me. Ghostbusters getting somewhat positive reviews, but we've seen this over the last years. I've been talking about the virtue signaling of film critics for a long time. I hate to use those terms anymore, those pejoratives like SJW or virtue signaling, but it feels like we're going backwards. This feels like 2015 again, or 2014, what have you, where it's the closet feminist, it's the 16-year-old bedroom feminist attacking these things, or attacking this stuff in our society. I mean, I thought we had moved past this a little bit and reached a more serious discussion, but I guess Chappelle proves that we haven't really made that much progress at all. I don't think Dave's lost touch with reality. That seems to be the common criticism here, is that if you notice this, they're attacking him for being rich, that he's reached a success. Remember when everyone praised him for getting the $60 million from Netflix? But now it's like, Dave is out of touch because he's rich. Of course, it's the narrative that continues. We have to attack rich people. We have to attack someone who has money. Of course, because he has money, he has privilege now, so he doesn't understand the struggles of society, even though he's a black man. And I'm sure he's dealt with some prejudice before. But no, Dave is out of touch because he lives in a mansion and he doesn't know anything. Sticks and Stones exists as a defiant design to intentionally offend large swaths of the audience Chappelle deems too thin-skinned and easily outraged. while serving up simple, low-bar yucks to anyone yearning for validation of their anti-PC stance. Oh, from Salon.com, of course. Thank you, Melanie McFarland. There's some truth to this, though. It is a defiant design to offend people who are too sensitive, but you're kind of once again proving that by being too sensitive and then trying to restructure it to, oh, this is just a validation for people who have an anti-PC stance. This is for MAGA guys on the internet, which Dave Chappelle is not in that group. So how can you associate him with that? He's clearly just using common sense, or just saying, well, some of this stuff's ridiculous. A lot of people in this country feel mixed on these things. You just can't vocalize them. There's been people at my workplace that have been fired over comments relating to things dealing with the trans community and other things. And it's a scary time. You can't say anything anymore. And people want to say, oh, well, you're not allowed to be an asshole anymore. It's like, it's not being an asshole. It's having humanity. Am I not allowed to discuss these things with humor, with levity? And am I not allowed to not understand them? That I am ignorant to them, perhaps, even though I don't think I am. And we're allowed to be weirded out by it because it's all happened so suddenly. And now all of a sudden it's like we went from trans people not even being 1% of the population to where it seems like they're 25% of the population if you just went off how the media talks about them. Like dropping in on a wascally uncle who doesn't know or doesn't care how much he's disappointing you. Sounds like a Donald Trump criticism. I mean, I'll agree that this wasn't one of Dave's better specials. I think this was like on the weaker end of his specials, but it was a tight hour. It was funny. I feel like some people are overpraising the special in a way to defend it against these attacks with their own political bias. I mean, I would give it like a 6 or a 7 out of 10. It was solid. And I'm rating it on Chappelle's standards, not on standards of other comedians. On his own standards, I'd say it's like a 7. But it was still solid, and I was never offended, and I don't think he went too far. I think he found a brilliant way of talking about these things and kept it innocent enough without really attacking people. I'm one of those assholes who's holding the beer without drinking it. It's just this is 9% alcohol, so if I chug it down, I'll get a little drunk while recording. Oh, here's a black man, Dante James. Overall, I found the special funny, entertaining, and yes, very edgy. But more importantly, I felt like in the end, the world of comedy benefited from it. Well done, brother. Well done. Okay, Roger Moore, who was one of the worst critics. One of the worst critics out there. I've read this guy for years, and he's not the Roger Moore from James Bond. You've got our attention, pal. You just haven't delivered the funny. Yes, this is your typical film critic or somebody who's an English major, journalist major, who can't write anything funny, but they attack comedians and often like to tell people what is funny or not. It's really hard to review comedy specials because of how subjective it is. It's not like a comedy movie where you can talk about the craft of the filmmaking with the comedy. A comedy special, it's like, well, if he's up there and the audience is laughing... I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, we all attacked Amy Schumer when she did that awful leather special, but at the same time, you know, I'm sure she still sold out that place and people were laughing. So, you know, it worked for her. She got the money. I mean, you can't say she wasn't successful. But whatever. Sticks and Stones leaves the audience with the sense that there was more work to be done before the special was filmed. Perhaps this is true. Perhaps it did need to be a little bit more polished. But once again, this just blind hate, this negativity, when it was everything Dave Chappelle's been doing for years. It was like the Louis C.K. thing. Nothing Louis C.K. did in that set wasn't anything he hasn't been doing since the 90s. And honestly, I thought it was one of Louis' better sets in a long time. I mean, that beginning, we're like, how has your year been going? I think I thought it was very funny, and I like the comedy being a little edgy again. It's like you can't be edgy to these people. Someone like Hassan Minhaj and talking about being an immigrant is what's brilliant comedy now. Not really. They don't seem to like the club comedian anymore. It seems like you have to have this broad, safe appeal to get praised now by the mainstream media. Ultimately, though, it feels like stale work from a comedian who was once known for truly boundary-pushing comedy, the kind that actually understood nuance, particularly where famous and powerful men were concerned. So now Dave doesn't understand men in power. He doesn't know how to criticize it. He's out of touch. That's the common criticism all of these outlets keep harping on, that Dave Chappelle's out of touch. When, this was him just talking about this subject. It was just another Dave Chappelle comedy special. He attacked these people. He was sort of reacting to the reaction to his previous Netflix specials. And then his next special is going to be about something else. That's how he does things. He changes it up every time. Lacking empathy can certainly be amusing. Really, I don't know if you actually feel that way, Ian Thomas Malone. But Sticks and Stones is a tired routine by a man who forgot to layer jokes into his act, too often sounding like a pundit on Fox News. Hey, Greg Gutfield is fucking hilarious, and I'm sick of people ignoring him. Also, Tucker Carlson, that face he makes is hilarious, and Jon Stewart did that for, 20 years and got called a genius? Sticks and Stones is designed to generate inflammatory coverage, and that's exactly what... Oh, I tapped the mic, I apologize. That's probably going to make a really annoying sound. Inflammatory coverage. It's a symbiotic cycle with no end in sight, and it's become the last thing a beloved provocateur should ever want to be. Predictable. Now, they're saying he's predictable. Judd Apatow used this criticism when he talked to, what's his name? I love the guy. Jim Norton and Sam on their Sirius XM podcast. And the criticism was that, he made the transgender joke where he said, I'm a location. People have been making that joke for years. Now, it's funny. They've been using the same tired Donald Trump jokes, anti-gun jokes. You even see these jokes in the Twilight Zone Jordan Peele show, where the first episode, the comedian's making these, against the Second Amendment jokes. And they've been doing that for years, and I don't see near the level of criticism, but whenever you talk about these subject matters, the gay community, equality for women, transgenders, you talk about Me Too and all of that, immediately it's out of touch because this is what's popular. This is what's in the zeitgeist. This is what young people are talking about and joking about. And there's too many examples to state here of the media attacking people on different platforms for talking about these things. And they act as if you do that you're some kind of bigot. You automatically get labeled as something. And they ignore the craft of the comedy. Now, if they were just criticizing the craftsmanship of the comedy, I would have less issue with this. But they keep talking about how this was designed to offend people while they're offended. And they're using that as a way to criticize this. But wouldn't it be better if you came across from a point of view where you said, well, it didn't offend me. I didn't really give a shit. I just didn't think it was funny. But the focus is on so much how it's offensive, and then a way to twist it and point the finger at Dave Chappelle like he's the villain of the story. Because it's so much easier to make someone a villain. That's what we do. Alright, so here's an article from HuffPost. Comedian Joel Kim Booster responds to Dave Chappelle's racist Asian joke. Dave Chappelle's homophobic and racist joke about Asians in his Netflix special, Sticks and Stones, did not go unnoticed. I love that it's immediately homophobic and racist by, it's objective. There's no opinion on this. In an interview with WNYC's All of It, Korean-American comedian Joel Kim Booster addressed the joke. Who the fuck is this guy? Has anyone heard of Joel Kim Booster? This is a nobody. This is an absolute nobody. Why would I give a fuck about what this guy thinks? He's been randomly brought up in different articles. Who cares? Who fucking cares? I mean, seriously. What the fuck? Oh, let's get our token Asian guy. Okay, in which Chappelle performs a backward, archaic, and blatantly racist impression of a Chinese person while taking a jab at trans people. He was doing that with a point. Jave wasn't doing the, ching chong, racist face and voice. He was making fun of that. He was using that stereotype, which is like Mickey Rooney in Breakfast at Tiffany's, to show the exaggeration of the ridiculousness. In the same way Mel Brooks used Blazing Saddles to show the ridiculous nature of racism and Hollywood movies at the same time. That's why it ends with us seeing it being a movie. Dave was using that voice and face to bring up the point that this stuff used to be offensive. This is offensive. I can't go around and claim to be an Asian and do these ridiculous things without it being noticed, just the same way these trans people do ridiculous things and say ridiculous things. Not that there isn't transgender people or transsexuals before that, it's just that the way they exaggerate things or make it a defiant political movement. Once the LGBT community became a movement, it wasn't just about being gay, because if your sexuality is what defines you, you're a pretty vapid person. I mean, there was that was kind of the thing, was that he was bringing up that old racist Asian stereotype to make the point that he was making. I mean, don't get me wrong, you could argue that it was a little cheap, but that was, I don't know, I felt like that was kind of the point. I don't know. I thought there was more to it than that. That's not one of the better jokes in the special, though. I'll admit that. Okay, Chappelle joked that if trans people were born in the wrong body, he could apply the same logic to race. What's more, Chappelle attempted to mitigate the errors by noting that his wife is Asian. Yeah, isn't it crazy that he brings up his wife is Asian, which means he probably isn't racist towards Asians, because if you're racist towards somebody, you probably don't want to fuck them. Booster said he originally avoided the subject, but ultimately found the whole situation kind of sad. Chappelle is someone who's been rich for a long time now and no longer has that many interesting things to say, because they're not really living in the same world you or I are living in at this point. So once again, Chappelle is rich now, so he's out of touch. Rich people bad, poor people good. Only poor, struggling artists can understand these things. The rich people are just so evil. Now that Chappelle has money, he's turned into an asshole. That you see, this narrative keeps being spun that because he's rich, it's always a way to attack people who have been successful. They are anti-success because they are not successful, so they're trying to get you to accept failure and attack successful people, that the only way they could be successful is by subterfuge, by being a bad person. There's no way they earn this, and that I'm mediocre. They all need to reflect on their own Salieri, but instead they're trying to bring you down to their level of failure, which is pretty typical for every college professor I ever had. It's kind of sad. I think Chappelle used to have really interesting and prescient things to say about power structures and things like that, and I just don't think he's interested in dismantling that anymore, Booster explained. At least not from an interesting place, or at least not from beyond his own point of view, which is his right as a comic, I guess. But it felt a little bit, I don't know, old when I watched it. Yeah, this is that typical thing where they try to talk about boomer tier humor. You know, boomers created like Saturday Night Live, National Lampoon, all the classic comedies from the 70s and 80s, every great comedy that we celebrate and hold as the standard. But no, apparently The Office is a masterpiece and much better than Seinfeld, and only meme culture and millennials understand humor and meta humor on a deep level, and anything before that is old and outdated. We have to make everything narcissistic about ourselves and indulge, and I've been tired of this for a long time. I'd bring up somebody like Shoe on Head, who brings up this criticism often, where she talks about boomer tier humor like she's a brilliant comedian. It's very annoying to me that these people don't understand wit, and I feel like they haven't read a lot of literature, and they don't know where a lot of this comedy comes from. I feel like they probably haven't even watched a Woody Allen movie, yet they have the gall to come on and criticize these comedians and talk about them being out of touch, when everything they say is just something anybody could do. Any young person could go up and just rant about their life and how boring it is and mundane it feels, and these are the kind of things you see a lot of the time, or reference the 90s and all of that stuff, and instead of actually having to structure a joke and write something, you know, actually have a poetry to it and know how to write prose. I've noticed this a lot. It's like, no, I just have to be cringy and that's hilarious. I don't actually have to put effort into anything, because effort is old school. How dare those old people put work into what they do? How dare you have wisdom? God damn your wisdom. You're irrelevant, you old fuck. Okay. Many critics are panning Chappelle's special as tired at best and offensive at worst. Once regarded as a comedian, sorry, it's beer, with edgy commentary on pulp culture, Chappelle came under fire for taking aim at subjects of leaving Neverland, two men who accused Michael Jackson of molesting them, which both of those guys have been widely discredited, by the way. all across the board. That documentary is pure bullshit propaganda in the same way Making a Murderer or a Michael Moore documentary is. It's pretty much been shown across the board those guys could be full of shit. There's no reason to trust them. There's also no evidence against Michael Jackson and never has been. Watch Razor Fist videos on this topic if you want to see more insight on it. But this is another smoke and mirror media thing. That we're just supposed to believe the guys in Finding Neverland, because what that is trying to push on you is you're supposed to believe all victims of everything when they attack anyone. And of course, once again, a man in power who is rich and out of touch, the narrative continues. They're even attacking members of the black community now, which is really sad, because everyone just ignores Michael Jackson was a black man, and now Dave Chappelle is under attack. It's funny, you can't be normal anymore. You either have to be politically bent one way or you have to lean the other way and be radical. You can't just be a person who feels normal, like you don't really know what's going on and you don't pretend to. I don't know when everyone became an expert on everything. He also performs a bit backing Louis C.K. despite his sexual misconduct towards women. Once again, you're ignoring the nuance in that. Slate's Inku Kang, what kind of fucking name is that? Compared watching Chappelle's special. Oh, this is that review we read from earlier about a rascally uncle who doesn't know or doesn't care. Now his jokes make you wince. The soundness of their logic is as intact as ever, but they're seldom informed by facts or new perspectives. I think a lot of it is informed by facts. I will agree that it's not informed by new perspectives. But like you said, jokes just need to have logic. Stories just need to have logic. Movies just need to have logic. Worlds need to have logic. They don't actually have to be realistic, and they don't have to offer a new perspective. They just have to be believable enough that you can buy into it when you're experiencing it. And Vanity Fair called the show stale work from a comedian who was once known... Oh, we read that review earlier, too. So let's go to our good old friend, Contra Points, who was on the Young Turks and says, "I'm embarrassed for Dave Chappelle." Good old Contrapoints. Now, to be fair, like I said, people have defended Dave Chappelle all across the board, so it's not like he needs any more defense. I mean, this is embarrassing.
Political correctness and comedy and
Look at these fucking dislikes. 21,000 dislikes to 6,000 likes. I can't believe I'm watching a Young Turks video. I feel like AIU right now. This is fucking embarrassing.
comedy's usefulness as a vehicle or as a tool to educate people, especially on the plight or the experience of marginalized communities that
You don't need to use comedy to inform people or give people an experience of marginalized people. You don't. I don't know why you're making these rules up that don't exist.
necessarily get a lot of mainstream attention.
You don't deserve mainstream attention when you're not even 1% of the population. Why should you be all... Why is it mainstream now? I'm sick of minority, like... Not a minority, like, where you're like 15% of the population, where you're not even 1% of the population, and you're supposed to be looked at like... We're supposed to see you like you're everywhere. There's no laws right now, as far as I know, against trans people. You should be allowed to be made fun of. That's equality. We can make fun of you just like you can make fun of anyone else.
You obviously have done a remarkable job in, as you mentioned, educating people on trans identity and trans issues.
About trans people. I haven't watched the whole special.
Yeah. And I thought, look,
Wow, what a sexy lady Contrapoints is. I'm really sick of people like Jack Saint bringing up Contrapoints or folding ideas, or Lindsay Ellis when they agree with them politically. Like, they're a fucking genius. Listen to Contrapoints and all that, and we're supposed to... Or I think of somebody like H-Bomber guy, when these people are all the most manipulative, evil pieces of shit I've ever seen. And they try to attack people who are just being more raw and funny and transparent. I think I have a good perception for bullshit or people when they're up to something. Someone like this is a fucking liar. Someone like this, I just see Contrapoints and I just think everything about you is bullshit. I wouldn't trust you with $1. You are just using this movement. You are just using the struggle of trans people to perpetuate yourself and to fight your own insecurities to look for fame, and you were jealous of the fame of others, so you have to punch up. Because they talk about Dave punching down, but really he's attacking things that are being supported by the mainstream. You're the ones that are trying to punch up and find success. And also, what's so wrong with punching down?
I'll be completely honest. Dave Chappelle and Aaron McGruber were incredibly influential in my development and my understanding of like black culture in America, because I didn't grow up in America. I grew up in Turkey.
Wow, this guy's like just so woke right now. He's been informed by Dave Chappelle about black people. Let's hear what Contra has to say.
I love this show.
By the way, Contra's a really good video game. I don't like you using that name. That offends me.
I think that some of his, what is it? I forget, there's one of his old specials. It's like killing me softly. Yeah. I think that's one of the greatest, stand-up sets of all time.
Wow, I agree with Contrapoints. Killing Me Softly is one of the greatest stand-up sets of all time. Top 10.
But I think that Dave Chappelle talking about trans people is not Dave Chappelle at his finest, and he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's kind of stuck at this very basic level that he can't get past, and he could just not do the trans jokes because he obviously doesn't really have anything very.
So you can't do trans jokes is what you're saying, because we're trying to say it would never be insightful to you, you fuck. It would never be new or edgy, because we've been making these jokes for years, and we've been making valid points for years, and I've looked into the fucking science, and I've done the goddamn research, and every time we bring this stuff up, you always just say we're ignorant or we don't understand, and then when you make your counter arguments, they're the same bullshit arguments we've been hearing for years. I'm not saying that you're not trans. I'm saying that you're a pussy that can't handle criticism or being mocked because you're too fucking sensitive, because you're a fucking freak, and you're using people that actually stand for something and go through something and feel something, and pretending that they all feel the same way you do. Have you ever thought that not everyone who is trans or gay agrees with you? Have you ever thought that not everybody thinks the same way you do? You're so fucking obsessed with yourself. That's all you care about. You don't care about other people. Quit faking this empathy. Also, that pause game, though. That pause game.
To say about it. And so it's actually, I'm just sort of embarrassed for him.
I love that someone like this is embarrassed for somebody as wealthy and successful as Dave Chappelle. Oh my God, I can't believe you're so embarrassed for him.
Rehash the same old, I identify as Asian. Ricky Gervais on stage in 2015 just did I identify as a chimp. How many hack comedians have already gotten up on stage to do the...
So Ricky Gervais and Dave Chappelle are hack comedians? It's a hack joke to make a pretty funny joke. I mean, it's funny. That's how ridiculous it is when you guys are like... You come up with 25 different definitions. I'm a transgender male, lesbian, non-binary, woof.
I identify as something wacky joke about trans people. Everyone's doing that. They've been doing it for years. And so, I think if this were any other joke, if it was not transphobic, we would accuse the comedians doing it now of stealing it because it's not a new joke. But for some reason, people just have infinite patience for doing the exact same transphobic joke.
Because it's still being pushed on us, all this bullshit from your community and this trans stuff, so the joke is still valid to point out the absurdism in it. The ridiculousness of people like you who are trying to make us act like you're the most important person in the world.
Again and again and again. And so part of me suspects that this is not... Does anyone really find that joke hilarious anymore? It's almost more of this...
Did you ever find it hilarious? That's what I would ask you. Did you ever find that funny? The moment's passing and it's gone. Kind
of stubbornness, it seems to me. They resent having been told not to make the joke, and so they're going to keep making it out of spite.
Yes, when you tell people not to make a joke and you tell people what they can say, they usually fight back with that in a country where you're allowed to say what you want. Yeah, isn't that weird how that works? See, some of us believe that you should be able to say what you want.
But is that really funny? It's not. I don't think it's very funny. I think it's very tiresome. I think it's overplayed. I think it's unoriginal. And it kind of, you hate to see it from someone as fine a comedian as Dave Chappelle.
Yeah, no, you nailed it. You talked about it in the darkness in the video that you made about comedy in general and political correctness, which I highly suggest you guys check out. It's great.
Please don't watch Contrapoints videos on those things. It's like sitting through an Aiden Paladin video at this point. I don't need to hear a drunk bipolar chick who's a fucking wacko rant for an hour about some bullshit that I don't care about in order to perpetuate her own intellectual superiority and her high IQ when she's really just a wacky bitch. I don't need it. I'm over
but
it.
like there
I already did
is dark humor to be. There is obviously something funny about trans existence as well as every other form of existence. Like,
that's a fair point. Thank you for bringing that up, Young Turk.
you can find humor
We won't go into the Young Turks
in
thing,
everything,
but
even in the darkest corners of I don't know, of any form of
why is it dark comedy to make fun of trans people? I don't think it's that dark.
marginalized
I think like pedophilia and rape jokes are dark.
identity. But there's a difference between like a really racist black person joke, for example.
Dude, will you shut the fuck
you're
up?
right.
You're
Dave
killing.
Chappelle, he keeps saying, like, as if it's this thing that he's insisting that we acknowledge. He's like, you have to admit that, you know, trans people, the predicament they're in is hilarious. Well, I agree, it is hilarious, but you know, the funny, you know, I'm a woman who used to be a man. Everything about that is hilarious, but I feel like there's a lot more to that than just like, oh, I identify as something weird. Like you know what I mean? Like that's not really the funny thing about being trans. The funny thing is, I talk about in my video, The Darkness. There's a video where the trans YouTuber Gigi Gorgeous, who's this like, you know, femme, beautiful trans woman, talks about like how she had to go to a sperm bank for you know, she's trying to you know, have.
No, it's pretty funny that you identify as something ridiculous. It's not that you identify as a woman or the man, it's it's when you make it deeper than what it is, when you abuse the science of sexuality and gender being a spectrum. I mean, I think Contrapoints is actually making somewhat of a valid point here, to be fair, but it's also like, really, is Dave Chappelle the person you need to attack with all the serious issues going on in the world and politicians? You're going to go after a comedian who has a special on Netflix? This really would have been harmless otherwise. You've turned it into something.
Yeah. In the sense, I feel like, on the one hand, I feel like political correctness does have a capacity to ruin a comedy. Sure.
You really? You think so? No, there's no way. That's never happened.
Comedy is at its heart.
You know, this guy's just talking on and on. He's not letting Contrapoints talk. I think he's a bigot.
People usually give it credit for, because I think that if you look at like sort of the culture war that we're in right now, and I think politics often has a culture war around it, like political correctness might be the most important like dividing issue. As far as comedy, I agree with you that I think that the excesses of
Man, I'm just too drunk to sit through this right now. I'm gonna be honest. I've had like 4 of these. I mean, I'm not. I want to lay on the floor right now and listen to the Smiths.
Outrage
I can't do
online
this.
make it very difficult to be a comedian, because to be funny, you have to. What makes a lot of jokes funny is that they kind of sort of balance very delicately on a line between, you know, the acceptable and the unacceptable.
Okay, whatever. Contrapoints isn't being that bad here. Let me look at the comments. Since when is being mentally ill the normal? Oh my god. Chappelle isn't hating. He's talking about who controls our culture and our obligations to each other as human beings, and you literally don't get it. It's only good cultural criticism as long as identity politics is not being critiqued. Young Turks are the biggest bunch of fuckwits. That's a good one. Imagine being that shit. So Contrapoints didn't even watch the special. Contrapoints just watched the part on trans people. Jesus Christ. Alright, well, like I said, Dave Chappelle, this wasn't his best special. This wasn't Dave Chappelle at his peak. This isn't the Prince real Hollywood story. This isn't, you know, Killing Them Softly. I agree, but it was fine. It wasn't that offensive. The fact that he was making jokes that are outdated. If you really don't care about these jokes, if you think they're outdated and stale and defiant, then that's fine. Just say, hey, I think he was outdated with these jokes. You don't need to make all of these videos, You don't need to write these reviews. You don't need to try to get these clickbait articles out to attack Dave Chappelle, because then you've created people making videos to respond to you, which just gives people, which a lot of these people are probably bad people, are probably negative for wrong reasons, power that they wouldn't have otherwise, and that you just fuel these people that you hate. Whenever you attack the people that you don't agree with, and I don't mean disagree with them, you attack them, then people defend them in a country like this where people believe in liberty and they believe in freedom. So when that happens, that kind of negates the arguments that you're making or the points you're trying to make, because clearly you're so upset you feel the need to defend this thing instead of just letting it exist and move on. As Dave says with the female equality and the basketball analogy, he says, here's another controversial opinion. You could just shut the fuck up. And sometimes shutting the fuck up is the best option. In my life, anecdotal evidence here, there's moments when you just need to shut the fuck up and not say anything and let something happen, and then it kind of just goes away and it's okay. And you can't expect too much from people because nobody's perfect. And I guess what I'm trying to get at with here is that with the title of the special, Sticks and Stones, and him saying that words can never really hurt people, words aren't violent, words don't affect you like actually being raped, like actually being attacked. When you treat words with this seriousness, when you treat words with this impact, like they can really hurt you deep down. And I know words can hurt. Words have hurt me. I've had things said to me that hurt my feelings. I'm human. But you have to understand at some point that they are just words, and you're letting your head get the better of you instead of actually thinking about, like, well, who gives a shit what this person thinks? And any of my advice would be to any of these people that are mad about the specials, just not to give a shit. Maybe you're not a fan of Dave Chappelle anymore. Maybe you've moved past him and you're into something else and he's not your thing anymore. That's fine. That's perfectly fine. It's okay to not like this stuff anymore, to not like these kind of jokes. But for those who do enjoy it, for people like myself who do enjoy this kind of stuff and enjoy comedy, and I consider myself a student of comedy, just, just live and let live. It doesn't have to be, everything doesn't have to be this big debate. Everything doesn't have to be about morality. We can throw that out of the window sometimes with entertainment and just take it for what it is, which is just a guy going up on stage and trying to be funny to people, which is very hard. It's a really hard thing to do. So I'm always going to support Dave Chappelle the same way I support Ignore McDonald when he talked about Louis C.K. and Roseanne Barr, and he actually said something really profound that people ignored. I'm going to support comedians. I'm going to support people who are trying to speak their own truth. And until somebody who provides, if Contrapoints was as brilliant and interesting and insightful as Dave Chappelle, if these critics were, then I might give them some validity to what they're saying. But you have to look at these people in life. Don't hang out with people that are failures. Really, these people try to bring you down. This is so true in life. This is a life lesson. People who are failures try to get you to be a failure so they don't have to feel like one as much. But then if you gravitate towards more successful people that have something to sell, that have something of value to society, don't feel bad for that. And don't let yourself be engulfed by the people who are failures who try to bring you to that level and try to make these excuses for their own lack of success or happiness in life. Because that's what it is most of the time. And they're trying to get you to feel that way too. There's a nihilism in it. Instead of you thinking, well, maybe if I do work hard enough and I am good enough and I do educate myself and bring value to other people, I can make something out of myself. Don't forget that that's a key part of life, and don't let these people bring you down because they couldn't figure it out. It's not their fault. I mean, it is to some degree, but they couldn't figure it out. Don't let them make you feel the same way because you're not happy with your life. You can do better. You can do more with your life, and it's worth it to try, instead of accepting failure because of some boogeyman figure that's keeping you from being successful or talented. because we all want to feel like we're more than what we are, and some of us just aren't, and that's the reality of life. And if you accept that, perhaps you could grow and turn into something interesting, or have something to add to society, or be at that place where you want to be. Maybe you could have the ending of the Shawshank Redemption happen to you. And don't let people like this bring you down. That's what they're trying to do. That's what I'm getting at here. They're trying to bring Dave Chappelle down. They're trying to make him the enemy. They're trying to make the rich guy the enemy, and trying to tell you being rich is bad because they're not rich. That's what a lot of it is. And it's okay to be rich. It's okay to be successful. And, you know, just fuck these people. Fuck the noise. Chappelle is the man. And I can't wait for his next special. And these people need to be baptized in the pure waters of Lake Minnetonka. I mean, that's all I got to say. So, I love you, Dave Chappelle. Thank you for giving us another comedy special. I'm glad to be alive in a time when he is a comedian. And I think he's going to kick our ass even more next time. I think this was just a warm-up to something even greater. And thank you for watching. And if you guys disagree with me, it's okay. Write in the comments. It's okay if you disagree with me. I know this got a little laborious. I know I dragged this out a little bit. It's a long video. But it's worth discussing because this is where we are at right now as a society. This is where we are at as America. Is we're so divided that we're attacking the comedians now, which I think our generation always said we wouldn't do. We were always pro-drugs, and we were always like, hey, people should be able to do what they want. And now we're attacking the comedy. And when you attack laughter, you attack expression. And when you attack expression, you just lead to a place of fascism, which I don't want to live in. But I'll see you guys next time.
I'm one of those people that's so smart that I'm uncomfortable in this world. And I'm scared to live. I'm not scared to live, but it's scary out here. God damn. I know how flimsy this shit is. I can see through I can see the truth. There's an animal inside of each and every one of you. It's not good. Shit is real.